Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. Today with me is Kara Johnson from Monger's Palate in Brooklyn. Kara, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah. As Shunan said, I'm Carol. I own Monger's Palate in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. It's just a little cheese shop. We sell cheese, charcuterie, and groceries. I've been working in the cheese industry for about 7 years, and in the food industry for about 15 years. And we really, at Monger's Palate, we're really focusing on highlighting like artisanal cheeses that are made by small farms in either Europe or the US. And so we teach a lot of classes on cheese pairings, but this is the first time I've done a tea and cheese, and I really, really love cheese, and I kind of got into learning about it, really, really love tea, and I got into learning about it through Shunan, so I'm very, very excited for us to finally do a collaboration where we can taste things together. So I'm really excited to learn with you guys as much about tea as you guys learn about cheese. So.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much again for joining me. So a couple of weeks ago, we actually did pretty intense cheese and tasting in private, just so we can make this selection. So today we have 5 different cheeses and teas. And so how we're gonna do this is I'm gonna introduce each tea first, and then Carol is gonna introduce the cheese that we have selected to pair with the tea. We're gonna try a little bit of the tea and a little bit of the cheese, and then we're gonna try them together to see if we yield something amazing once they were combined. If you have ordered our package, Carol had sent this little sheet with it, but the list is on the website too. There is a little mistake on the sheet. So basically the last one actually corresponds with the first cheese. So all the cheese basically gets like recycled. So number 5 is not number 1, number 1 is number 2, number 2 is number 3, so on and so forth. But the order on the website is correct, all right? So the first tea I want to introduce is a green tea called Longjing. It has this signature flat shape, and because it has been flattened by hand in the wok, what it does is it actually helps the tea to shed all the tea hair that totally change the ratio of the profile of the tea. So the most signature note for Longjing is that it's very nutty. Actually, when I tried so many different teas and so many different cheeses, I have to say I really fell in love with how well Longjing paired with so many different cheeses because it has really pleasant tannins. It has like this underlying sweetness, and it's nutty. So it's a really perfect tea to pair with almost any cheese. I actually have 3 teas that I cold brewed, but Longjing is one of the teas I'm gonna hot brew. So here I have 2 fairness pitchers. So when you brew green tea, you do want to use open vessel. This way you don't cut the tea leaves. So the heat in the vessel can basically leave the vessel. I'm gonna quickly cool the water a little bit. And we can quickly drop the tea into the water. Sorry, the hot vessel doesn't have water. And this way you can smell. So immediately some nutty floralness comes out. Sometimes people will say it tastes like roasted sunflower seed or roasted chestnut. Actually, roasted chestnut is the basically textbook version of description for a Longjing tea. When we brew the green tea, you want to pour it around the rim. You can pour it directly towards the center. All right. And I do need to let this tea brew for a little bit, so I'll actually take a moment to talk a little bit more about the Longjing. So Longjing is often regarded as the king tea of China. I would say for the past 200 years, there's probably rarely a tea that's more famous than Longjing. It has a very blunt profile, So if you think of certain profile as being sharp, as being pointy, as being uprising, Longjing is not like that. However, it is a very robust tea. It's very forward, but in a very blunt way. It's also very weighty as well. But nuttiness is definitely its most signature trait. All right. Carol, would you like to introduce the first cheese before while waiting for the Longjing to brew?
Yeah, of course. So I chose to brew this tea cold, mainly just for convenience. So we'll be trying it two different ways with the same cheese. But the first cheese, if you have cheese, the first cheese we're doing is the Tome de Chèvre Grand Mère. So it's the one with the gray rind on your plate. And it's a goat cheese. So typically in the past, I've found that green teas and goat cheese pair well together. But whenever I'm doing a tasting, and this one is a little different than normal, but typically whenever I'm doing a tasting, I work from the mildest to the strongest. And I think probably Shunan would say the same thing for the tea. And we always do that with wines as well. And it's kind of hard to determine that, but for most cases, something like a fresh goat cheese is going to be on the milder side compared to the other ones. So Tome de Chèvre Grand Mère on your list is from central France in the Loire Valley. This is a really good example of the three parts of a cheese. So going forward, when you're tasting the cheese, it's always, really important to pay attention to the three parts. The rind, which is just that outer covering, always edible, but not always palatable. In this case, you definitely want to eat the rind on soft cheeses. Then the cream line right underneath is going to be where the cheese is the most ripe, as it ripens outside in. So cheese ripens just like fruit. Essentially, it's full of living organisms, and as it ages, it gets either more concentrated or more soft, depending on the cheese. And then the center is the paste, and that's going to be the youngest part of the cheese. So when you cut yourself a piece, you're going to be eating all three parts and kind of tasting three different textures. So Tome de Chèvre is, what causes this gray rind is ash, vegetable ash on the outside, and then grows over the ash. You can't really see the layer if you pull it back, is penicillium molds. So it's a style we call a bloomy rind cheese. So much like tea, there are different categories for cheeses that we advance through. And the first one we usually start with when we're doing tastings is bloomy rind, which just means you've got those soft blooming molds on the outside. So Tome de Chèvre Grand Mère just means a round of grandmother's goat cheese. And Jacquin and Phil's is the dairy. So it's a father and son and family, two-generation family operation in central France. And they buy milk from cooperative dairies around their creamery, and they truck that milk in. So they have a certain mile radius that they can get milk from, and they support all the local dairies to make the cheese. How is your tea doing, Shunan?
Yes, I actually just filter the green tea out. When you filter the green tea, make sure you do not dump all the tea out. Leave a little tea with the water. This will help to prevent the tea leaves from oxidizing, because green tea has a very low oxidation level. But the best I can explain it is like, consider almost like teas always want to oxidize. They want to fulfill that destiny. So because it starts with the lower oxidation, so once you brew it, it'll have the higher tendency to keep oxidized. So you want to, it's almost like you cut the potatoes and then keep the potatoes in water to prevent potatoes from oxidizing. So very similar to the green tea. Of course, the alternative solution would to drink the tea really, really fast. But because we want to do multiple steepings, keeping the tea in the water helps to preserve the original notes of the tea. So here I have, I'm gonna pour the tea into the cup. So if you have the tea, because I know a few out of the city folks has ordered the tea, but not the cheese, because we can only do local delivery at the time. So feel free to sip the tea you like. I would say not only the tea, I already mentioned nuttiness many times, but when they're together, It also has like a sense of like a buttery ness to it. It's almost like uh, olive oil kind of feeling to it. It's pretty bright. And how do we now? Should we try some of the cheese?
Yeah, absolutely.
I do have a question, Carol. So I see now the cheese has, I mean the now rind part has like 2 layers. Does it have more layers as it age?
Good question. No, it doesn't. But the layers change. So I'll hold this for those of you who don't have cheese. I'll hold it as close as I can, so you can see cream line is right here, rind
Yes.
is here, and the paste. As this cheese ages, and this isn't the case for harder cheeses because there's less moisture. So
Mhm.
with more moisture in a young cheese, you have a higher bacteria count essentially, and more bacterial activity, which means the cheese boils faster. Um, and it also means it ripens in a different way than a harder cheese. So as it ages, this line of ripeness will advance to the center. So if you've ever bought a bad cheese at a grocery store and it's like a kind of wet and squishy and it's ammoniated, that's just what happens when it gets to the point where there's nothing left for the bacteria to eat, and then it's overripe. But that line will advance as it ages.
I see. Cool. And how old did you say this one is? Like, or how long it has age for this one?
This one, so they send it out in about a month. All of the European cheeses, almost all of them that I receive, get shipped by container ship. That's the cheapest way to import cheese from Europe. So it's a pretty long journey, and then it has to go through checkpoint and then distribution center and then to me. So usually it takes at least between 2 weeks and a month for a cheese to reach me. So I would say right now this one is about 2 months old.
I see.
So pretty young cheese.
Try the cheese together with the tea. Oh, so this is a very creamy cheese. Like to me, it's almost like the note is almost like yogurt. You know, when you eat really, really good yogurt, there's um, a creamy aroma that yogurt has, but in milk somehow it's a little bit less of. And it definitely amplifies that. And it's a pretty like tangy cheese. And this also helps with that as well. One of the best thing I love drinking tea and eating cheese is that with hot tea, it actually melts the cheese. So all the notes that you taste do get amplified. What do you think, Karen?
I'm having it with a cold tea. So it's a really nice balance. I think they're not. So we tasted these pairings before, but every time you brew the tea, of course,
Yeah, it's
the
a little bit
taste.
different.
Yeah, every factor affects it, and the cheese certainly comes in different every time I receive it. But I think it's well matched. 10 of the two of them together. Um, One of the things that's great about cheese and beverages is if you have strong, sharp flavors, like if that flavor sticks out, or if there's a lot of astringency or tannins, like in the leaves of the tea, that
Right.
fat in a cheese will balance it out really well.
Exactly. I would say Longjing, I mean, of course, this is the first brew, so it's actually just skimming the aroma off from the tea. But overall, green tea as a category is the more tannic category. And then the Longjing is also known for being a pretty strong green tea as well. So altogether, however, and cheese are, I would say most people probably agree that cheese is a stronger tasting thing than tea. So when you have a relatively milder cheese with a relatively strong tea, it actually matches really, really well together. There's a little bit of grassiness that I think maybe comes from the rind that I taste was the tea as well.
Yeah, definitely. So all of the words that you use to describe tea can also be applied to cheese or just like wine as well. So if I say it tastes grassy or nutty, it's not just a descriptor. It also refers to the chemical reactions that's going on as a cheese ages. So the chemical breakdown is actually an amino acid chain that causes those flavors, and that can be the same chemical breakdown that's happening in tea as well. So one of the great things about pairing when Shunan sends me the notes is that if she has notes that say grassy, I know that that same reaction can be occurring in the cheese and match those up or compare and contrast them. And that really helps with picking pairings. You can do either opposite to her note or the same as the note she sends.
Yes. Cool. So now let's move on to the next tea and the next cheese. But don't worry, I actually do want us to, when we finish, I want us to kind of cross match the tea and the cheese because we do try to cross match them just so it's not like one cheese only goes with one tea and then the other ones are horrible. So we want to make sure that none of them is horrible and they all have something interesting to offer. And the pairing are just consent between Tara and I, but you obviously probably will prefer something else, which is totally fine. The next tea I'm going to brew is a white tea. I have cheese on this pan, so I'm actually going to use only one hand to brew the tea. This is a white tea called Bai. So white teas are named after picking grades, even though there are many more quality differentiators with like despite the picking grade. However, the teas are named after the picking grade, so virtually there are only 4 names for the traditional white tea. The first picking grade is called Bai and the second picking grade is called Bai. It consists of a bud and 2 leaves. This one is from 2012. White tea has aging potential. So this one actually has really clean aged taste. Sometimes when you age tea, you do run into certain risks, such as when humidity gets into the tea, and then the tea will start to taste moldy or kind of old. This one, even though by now I think it's like 8 years old, it offers a really nice introduction to what an aged white tea will taste like. It basically has notes of mead. So mead is the honey wine, and if you drink mead, you notice that there's a note that's specifically in mead, but not in honey. It's that note that comes through a lot in this tea. It's also very herbaceous tea as well. When a white tea is fresh, it's actually quite yeasty. It offers certain satisfaction, almost like a sherry. And but as they age, that yeasty note actually starts to give away to the more herbaceous and meat note. It's almost like the tea, in a way, the overall profile gets lower and lower in terms of how it sinks in. However, certain note gets brighter and brighter as it ages. The younger white tea will usually be grassier. So we actually do not drink the first brew. It's just to wake up the leaves. And I'm going to give it to my lovely tea pet here. I don't even know if it shows up on the screen. But it's a lovely tea pet. Oh, by the way, so the white tea comes from a province in China called Fujian. So Fujian is a very diverse province in terms of the dialects the single province speaks, and then also the tradition and cultures and things like that. So it comes from a region that we'll call the Eastern Fujian, and within that there is a city that's like a secondary city. The city belongs to a city called Fuding. In Fuding, there's a township called Diantou. So this one comes from Diantou. And usually when we talk about location, because location is the number one value factor for tea. So majority of price you pay for the tea, you pay for the location. So you basically want to say this is from Diantou Fuding Fujian province. Right? And feel free to slurp when you drink the tea. Not only it lowers the temperature, but it also helps to open up your sinuses so you're able to experience the tea a little better. Yeah, it has a like floral notes, but along the line of like chamomile, chrysanthemum, those kind of flowers. What do you think, Carol?
It's really nice. So I have this cold brew as well. And just comparing it to the Longjin, there's so much more astringency immediately for me, the way I brewed it, which is just really nice. And it's much more floral. So I'm excited to try it with the cheese.
Yes. So would you like to introduce this, the elk blossom? This is a very interesting cheese. I was like super surprised when I tasted it.
Yeah, so the way we ended up choosing the cheeses was I basically just sent a bunch of cheese to Shunan and she tried them and told me what she liked. And then I tried them and figured out what I liked. But it ended up
really, really hard for
yeah, it was a hard job. I drank so much tea, I was shaking. But
I know, and I was like, there's so much cheese. I was like, am I like overload on sodium? I was like, my head was like bulging over here.
So how it ended up was we ended up with a lot of German cheeses, which is just what happened. Normally I try specifically when we're doing classes to kind of spread out the countries, but I just wanted to focus this time on what worked together well. So Alp Blossom is online. If you research it, it'll say Austria, and actually right now they've switched production. So it's a formerly Austrian cheese that's now only made in Germany. It was a collaboration between a cheesemaker in Austria and then an affinor in Germany. So affinor ages the cheese. And he decided to take over the whole production. So Alp Blossom has herbs and flowers on the outside from the hay belt in Germany where the cows graze. So in the spring, they let the cows out. And from April to October or November, the cows will graze on just about like hundreds of different flowers and herbs. And so their idea for this cheese was to harvest and dry those flowers and herbs and then press them under the surface of the cheese to kind of permeate the cheese with the same cross flavors that you would find in the milk. So all of the things that the cow eats kind of come out in the milk. So that the flavors you're tasting are actually the influence of the grass or the herbs and flowers that they eat. So this is a raw milk cheese. I don't want to go too much into pasteurization and raw milk, but you can either have a pasteurized or raw cheese. And the older cheese from Europe tends to be raw milk, which creates a little more complex flavors. So raw cow's milk pressed with, it's like rose petals, marjoram, lavender, calendula. I don't remember all 30 of the herbs, but it creates really aromatic and floral cheese. And it's an alpine style. So you notice the paste doesn't have any eyes. There are no openings, which means the curds are washed with hot water to remove some of the lactose, which reduces the acidity of the cheese, and then pressed really tightly in a mold to make a cheese that's going to last for a really long time. So it's a cheese that has some nutty caramely notes and then the floralness of the rind, and it's low in acidity. So it's a cheese that's meant to travel. It's essentially created as a cheese that will last a really long time.
Right. Did you say there are 30 flowers and herbs coating the cheese?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
30 flowers and herbs. And so every time I cut it at the shop, flowers and herbs fall everywhere, and then they get stuck to all of the other cheeses. But it's a delicious cheese.
Yes, it is. When I first tried this cheese, I was just so shocked at how floral it is. Sometimes I do hear people talk about a cheese being floral, but I was like not quite getting it because like floweriness and cheese don't seem to be the two things that identify each other. However, this one was definitely very, very floral. It's also, given how floral it is, it's actually a pretty mild cheese as well. Like it's a cheese that you can keep eating. It doesn't overwhelm your palate at all. Let's try it with the tea. Mm. I really, really love this pairing, especially when I chew the cheese with the tea. Um, it definitely bring out the floralness a little bit stronger. However, it also seems to make things more well defined and elegant as well. What do you think, Carol?
I think it's the perfect amount of each flavor.
Yeah.
The outblossom is a mild cheese, but the flowers can be really strong. Sometimes we joke and we say it tastes like pizza because there's some herbs in it that kind of can make it taste like a like a margarita pizza essentially. So I generally find when I'm pairing with with things that if you don't have the right amount of floral in the say the wine or the tea, then the cheese overpowers it with those flowers. But I think this is a really nice balance with the tannins.
Yes. And it also has like the finish is almost like bread. Like you know how when you eat bread, it gives you a very specific note that just sits on your palate. It kind of have that effect as well. Um, and probably should mention that a traditional white tea is sun dried. It literally uses nothing but the sun. And this is a sun dried white tea, so it has a lot of like what I call like a sensitive cotton kind of note to it. It has warmth. It's a cool tea, both the color suggestion and also the overall feeling, but yet it feels it also feels warm like the sun. And so altogether, I think this definitely gives us a almost like put us in the scenery of the like on the meadow with the wildflowers, the grass, and the sun.
Yeah. A danger sometimes with tea and cheese is that things get metallic. There's the certain tannins in the tea leaves can sometimes work against the cheese, but so far we haven't had that problem. So I feel like we've done all right.
Yes, yeah. I would say the biggest problem I had when we tasted so many the tea and cheese, when it was not a good pairing, I would say sometimes it would be uh, the gamey note comes through so much. So instead of having the tea bring out more of the nuanced notes of the tea, the dairy note, then I was just saying the note of the cow, of the sheep, of the goat comes through too much. So that would be when I wouldn't say it's the best pairing, even though I actually do love the gamey note of like lamb so much. But I can understand why it's such a strong note for a lot of people. All right, so I hope you guys are enjoying this as we do in front of the screen. So next one we have the 大红袍, which is a oolong. So I have cold brewed this tea. If you guys are wondering, these are awesome bottles from Hario. It's a Japanese company. They make a lot of the coffee equipments as well. Hario. This is the tea brewer they make. I mean, the functional wise is pretty simple. The only thing is they have the filter here at the cap, which hides it and makes it overall look pretty elegant. When I cold brew the tea, I do cold brew them for 48 hours. So I basically 2 nights. That for me is the best result. And when we send you the tea, is in the little packet. You can just dump the whole package in and leave it in your fridge for 2 nights, which is really, really simple. So here, I'm gonna have a sip. So this is a dark roasted oolong. Now, oolong is a very big, very dynamic category. Some of the lightest teas are oolong, and some of the boldest teas are also oolong. This one comes from a UNESCO World Heritage Site called Wishan. It's a beautiful scenery, of course, highly recommend anybody to visit. Um, the tea is harvested using only leaves, and this is kind of how oolongs are made. And people will shake the tea occasionally during the making, and this is what gives oolong such floral notes. So basically, there's no other tea as aromatic or as fragrant as a oolong as a category. Now, when we roast the tea, so tea that has been roasted multiple times because it is a blend. So you do have to roast the individual cultivars separately, and that usually takes at least 2 rounds of roasting. And then afterwards, we'll blend the tea, and then with them combined, keep roasting them so the flavor blends really, really well together. The name of the tea, 大红袍, that's actually a suggestion that it's a blended cliff tea. Now, this tea actually comes from the area that's relatively high elevation for the region. It's about 900 meter to 1,000 meter in elevation. For given how north this whole tea region is, it's actually really impressive. It's one of the coldest tea regions. Usually with a very cold climate, the tea has a sweeter, milder undertone. So it seems the tea has a almost like a more gentle temperament, but it's very long lasting. So if you hot brew the tea can last for a really long time. And of course, the roastiness gives the tea the satisfaction we usually get from a beverage that's been roasted, almost like a coffee kind of feeling. So I highly suggest if anybody is trying to convert a coffee drinker to tea drinker, cliff tea will be a very good start. And the floral notes also comes through. It has like almost like a notes of like a dry leaves or wet leaves in the forest. You know how sometimes if you step on the wet leaves in the woods that's like fall right under the tree, it has notes of that as well. It definitely has like a sweet undertone, a little bit like a chocolate note as well. Kara, would you like to introduce the cheese that goes with the tea?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited about this one. I know this one's your favorite cheese.
I love
Um,
it. Super
oh,
good.
the terroir-sourced. Okay. So I'm skipping around from what we normally do, which is to do blue cheese last. Blue cheese isn't any different from any other cheese. The only distinctive factor that makes blue cheese blue is the blue mold. So instead of adding white mold cultures that would create that bloomy white mold on the outside, like say for a brie, you add blue mold cultures, and it's only one of two: Penicillium roqueforti or Penicillium glaucum. I'm sure there's other ones that have been accidentally used, but those are the ones we only use now in like the regulated dairy industry. So when people say they don't like blue cheese, what they're reacting to is the blue mold and the metallic flavors that blue mold can have. But there's some confusion. Blue cheese can be made with any type of mammal milk. So cheese can be made with any type of mammal milk. We focus on, as cheesemakers, goat, sheep, cow, and water buffalo. So you're trying all four of those today, or if you have cheese. Each milk type has a different composition in terms of fat and protein, and the levels of different amino acids creates different strengths of flavor. So if you don't like goat cheese, try sheep's milk cheese, and vice versa. So sheep is very high in fat. Cow is a little bit underneath that, and then goat is the least. So that also can affect the mouthfeel. So when you're choosing cheeses to go with tea, that's one thing to think of. And then of course the molds you add determine what style of cheese it is. But terroir-sourced is a blue cheese, and blue cheese can be made anywhere in the world with any type of milk. It's just the blue mold that defines it, just to clarify, because people get really confused. Terroir-sourced Blue is another German cheese. Arturo Terroir-sourced is the cheese maker. German cheese has a long and complicated history, and it was very defined by production rules from the government until recently, essentially until like 2015. And Arturo is from Ecuador, He moved to Bavaria. He fell in love with a Bavarian woman, and ended up staying in Bavaria and starting an apprenticeship at a dairy in the Bavarian Alps. I can't pronounce it in a way that will not ruin the name, but it's basically Casery Obermude, and that's the dairy that he's taken over production at. And he developed this style of blue cheese as like a combination between Roquefort, which is a French sheep smoked blue, and a Bavarian, traditional Bavarian blue cheese, which is just called Bavarian blue. And he makes it a little differently than most cheesemakers make their blue cheese. He adds the mold later on. So you get, I'll hold it up. You get a really closed paste with just a little bit of blue mold and a very, very creamy, grassy flavor, which makes it really great for pairings. So go ahead and taste.
Yes. Yeah, I absolutely love this cheese. It just has so much to offer. So almost like with every bite, I taste something a little bit different and all very, very pleasant. It's definitely very creamy, very buttery. It has, there is a standard taste of cheese that we all love so much. This one has a lot of those. And it's very savory, very umami. It's kind of nutty as well and has a little bit like a sweetness to it. There's also like a smoky background, which I really like. Like it's not a smokiness that we usually, taste in things that's just very forward right there. It's almost like there's like a smoke watermark or something in the background, which is super, super nice.
Yeah. That's my favorite pairing so far. I think they are so good together. There's like, they both together, it's like a smokiness that I didn't notice before.
I totally agree. And the cheese is rich. Altogether, even from the mouth feel point of view, it's almost like a complete dish or something. Like there's like people should make a syrup of this tea and then put it on this cheese and wrap in the thing and then serve it just like a entree or something. Like it tastes like a complete like bite of things. Yeah. The tea kind of coat the cheese with some like the bright notes. It doesn't make the cheese brighter, but it's like it adds up to a brighter layer of the cheese, and it's almost like some kind of candy taste to it.
There's a lot of sweetness on the end. That's why I love this blue cheese, especially for pairings, because people expect it to be a blue cheese to be really be pungent and aggressive, and this one is just very subtle.
Exactly, and it's not sharp. I think for a lot of people who doesn't like blue cheese because it's kind of sharp, but you do like the blue cheese that has that weighty creaminess, and this one has the weighty creaminess but doesn't have the sharp note.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Next one, let me introduce the tea. So this is a tea called 去多仔. 去多仔 means little fuzzy baby. And so oolongs, this is also oolong. Now oolongs are more typically made with a single cultivar than not. So the 去多仔, and then the tea is named after the cultivar. So the last one that we had was a blend. This one is called 去多仔, and that's because it's made from this tea tree that's called 去多仔. This is a tea tree. I would say if you are learning about varietals, it's almost unavoidable to talk about this tea tree. It's a tea tree that has a solid trunk. So it's a trunk style tea tree. Usually when it's a trunk style tea tree, the leaves are pretty large because this style tea tree usually are found in warmer climate. However, 去多仔, like the name suggests, it's a typical small leaf trunk style varietal. The leaves are very small, so it really stands out in its living environment where all the other tea trees are really big tea leaves. And if you have seen a tea leaf, so the tea leaf has really has like what's the English word? But it's like it's not a smooth edge. It's like this, like a seesaw kind of edge. So yeah, it's like, what is it called? Serrated?
There, yeah, maybe. Not a botanist, but maybe.
And then, so chitose is extra deep in that. It's kind of fuzzy looking almost. So if you run your finger through it, it has that edgy feeling. Udons are typically made with medium-sized leaf cultivars. From my experience, when it's made from a small leaf varietal, it's very, very aromatic. So udon is already very aromatic as a category, and this is extra frequent, extra aromatic. Chitose actually has another name for marketing purposes. People sometimes call it almond fragrance. Actually, it's not almond, it's apricot kernel. This is due to the major mistranslation of almond being translated to apricot kernel in Chinese, which is not the same thing. So, but they do have similar notes. Apricot kernel basically is like a very intense almond note. So the reason it's nicknamed that is because the tea, this varietal, does have that signature note in it. So it's nutty, but it's a very specific kind of nuttiness. It's another comparison was also it's almost like a cherry flavored that thing you get from movie theater, like the frosty thing. So it's a very different note from fresh cherry, right? Now, the previous style of oolong that we had was a medium fermented, heavily roasted oolong. This style of oolong is called Phoenix oolong or Dantong. This style of oolong is actually heavily fermented and mediumly roasted. So it tastes more ripened. What it means is that it has more of fruity notes that coexist with the floral notes. And combined with the nuttiness this tea has, it actually has a little bit of like a cacao note to the tea. Also, this particular varietal has a distinctive metallic note to it as well. This one actually comes from one of the top terroirs for the region. It's called udon. It has some of the mossy note as well. So it's almost like if you go to the forest and you take a tree bark and you smell it, it has a little bit of that note. It's a very complex tea for sure. But it's a very strong tea. It's kind of tannic. So, Carol, when you're hot brewing it, it's probably more tannic than the other teas that you had before.
Yeah. I also am not probably not perfect in my brewing technique. I brewed this a little short. So, are we ready to take a look at the cheese?
Yes.
This is a sheep's milk Gouda. So it's on your list as a Bioshoppen Trur Gouda. Bioshoppen Trur Gouda. Trur is a dairy. They have creameries in Holland and in Germany. Bioshoppen just essentially means organic. And Gouda, I'm not going to say Gouda because I'm not Dutch, but traditionally the word Gouda refers to the town of Gouda in Holland, not where they make Gouda, but where they would sell Gouda. So it's a style that's been developed probably in the 1400s, we think. Most cheese recipes started much earlier than that, but it kind of came to light in the 1400s and it had its heyday between the 1400s and the 1700s. So all the Holland was drained, the swamps were drained and turned into pasture land, and it's a perfect environment for cows. So mostly cow's milk cheese. And they would make these large wheels of cow's milk cheese that could ship really well and bring them to the town of Gouda to trade. And that became a huge export in like the Dutch Golden Age. And it's much imitated and it is not name protected. So a lot of cheeses, like Roquefort or Comté are name protected and have to be made in a certain region. Gouda can be made anywhere in the world. So although it originated in Holland, there's lots of, you'll see US Goudas or Australian Goudas and it's all the same. It's about a technique, not so much a place anymore. So this is unusual for Goudas, which is most typically made with cow's milk. This is made with sheep's milk. And it's kind of greasy right now, which is good. You want your cheeses to come to room temperature. So you can kind of get the flavors that you wouldn't, we'd call it tempering, just like you would with chocolate. And when it gets greasy, that's fine. That just means it's the high butterfat content getting momentum, and you'll be able to taste things a little bit more. But Tour Dairy is an organic Gouda cooperative, like most cheese makers. You have a creamery that makes the cheese, and then the dairy that produces the milk. If it says farmstead dairy, that means the cows are raised, or the animals are raised in the same place where the cheese is produced. So most European dairies, a lot of them will buy milk and bring it in from the neighboring towns and then make their cheese. So this is what they do. They usually have a herd of their own cows, and then they also buy supplemental milk. Sheep, this is our first sheep. And I love sheep smoked cheese. I think it's some of the best. Just in general, some of my favorite cheeses are sheep's milk. You have that really high fat content, and you get a lot of like nutty, they call it lanolin, which is the oil on the sheep's wool that gets into the milk, and you can taste that. So you get like a really nutty, fatty cheese that pairs well with wine.
Yes.
So go ahead and try it with the cheese.
Yeah.
Or the tea, sorry.
It has a little bit of like is that a calcium that's in the cheese?
So if it's on the outside of a cheese, like a cheddar, it's calcium, and if it's on the inside, the little crystals are amino acids. They're tyrosine crystals.
Yeah, I mean, this is my absolute favorite cheese when we taste it even more in this selection. And I was actually worried I might be too shallow for liking the cheese because some time ago, a chef friend of mine told me it's very shallow to like Gouda because Gouda was so popular. But I was like, this cheese is just so pleasant. It has a singular note that I love so much in food, maybe because I'm Asian, is the umami note, right? It's so umami. And it's almost like a concentrated chicken soup in my mouth. So yeah, the amino acid, that's the crystallized amino acid definitely makes sense because I can taste the amino acid.
Yeah, a lot of people come in and ask for cheese with crystals, and that's just what you're asking for, is lots of amino acids.
Yeah. And I really love this pairing because it's very surprising. The cheese is umami, it's pleasant, it's not holding back with its deliciousness. It's almost like delicious in the most basic way, but it's a compliment. You know, it's like it's not trying to be unique, fancy, or something. It's like everybody can agree this is the delicious taste that we want in food. And the tea, you know, it's tannic, it's nutty, it's metallic, and it's a little bit oozy. But when it combined, it's something completely different. It like when I combined the two together, it did not taste like the cheese nor the tea at all. It's like completely create a different flavor. It's very nutty, and it tasted almost like a different cheese. So that's why I love this pairing so much because it's like I get a different flavor from this.
A third better thing is what we always hope for.
Yes.
That's really nice together.
Yeah. What do you get from this combo?
I think there's a lot of sweetness in the Gouda because the recipe for Gouda washes some of the acid off the curds. So you get you cook them at a higher temperature, it caramelizes the sugars, you get a sweeter cheese, and then some of the acid is washed off the curds with hot water. And so I think this tea brings out even more of that caramel sweetness, which I think is really nice. It's like a little, it's almost like a dessert pairing.
Yeah, and then also the amino acid in food or anything, because tea also is very rich in amino acid. And if you push that elements to the back of your tongue, it makes you salivate more. And I would say this combination together have that effect even more so than any of the other combos I had.
Really nice.
Yeah. All right, so the last tea that I have is a red tea. So first of all, red tea is what in the West people call black tea, but in China we have a different category of tea already called black tea. So we don't want to confuse with the red tea, which we've always been calling it the red tea. Now, usually when people think of a red tea, you probably will think of something that's very astringent. You need to add sugar or milk to run it out. But it's actually because it's not made very well. Red tea, by definition, is a fully fermented tea, and is actually the sweetest, the roundest, one of the most easy to drink and pleasant tea. This one is a real Kiman. So I would say Kiman is probably one of the better known Chinese teas in the West. It comes from a township in China called Qimen. So together, a red tea from Qimen in Chinese we call Qimen Hong Cha. So usually the abbreviated version would just be Qi Hong. And it will be further named depends on the shape of the tea. This one is made, basically does not involve a shape making. So when you have a tea that does not involve shape making, it's called Mofeng. So either this tea can be called a Qihong or a Mofeng. Either way is fine. And I already mentioned that it's definitely the sweetest tea. So the sweet nose is much more forward. Even though I mentioned sweetness with the other teas as well, but the other teas, the sweetness is almost like a abstract version of the sweetness. It's like you're not sure if you're actually tasting sweetness or it's just like in your head. It feels sweet, but this one is actually sweet. It's more, it's like a reality version of the sweetness. And it has notes of rose as well. It's slightly yeasty. This one comes from a location within Heman called Shiji. Shiji has been one of the more popular terroir in the recent years because there has a discovery of a lot of wild tea trees in the village. So this is actually comes from semi-wild tea trees. So basically, when the villagers found it, they were wild, but for the last 3-4 years, people have been kind of maintaining it, so it starts to become like a little bit less wild. Just like wine, the age of the tea plant is very important. So whenever you have tea that comes from the more traditional regions, you have more chance of having the tea that comes from the indigenous varietals, and those indigenous varietals usually were planted from generations before us, so they're older as well. And the older tea trees, one is definitely taking more advantage of the land, but also tea trees are evergreens. So you can imagine, you know, the tea tree lives for 200 years, and if you have a tea tree that's only like 5 years old, you know it's not at the full potential of its it's not at the prime as the flavor potential. So when you have an older tea from an older tea tree, it's just like even for what this particular tea tree is, it's been pushed to higher and if it's prime time. So that's why teas from the older age usually have a fuller, more complex profile. What do you think here about this tea?
I have to take the first sip. It's so distinct to me as an amateur. It's very distinctly different. So distinctly different from the last couple of teas we've had. What would be some words you would use to describe the Shunan?
I would say it's like it's definitely sweet. It's like the sweetness is more upfront, and it's rosy. It's also it has notes of honey. So whereas the Baimudan has more of the meat note, this one has more of just like honey note. It's like, you know, honey has like a slightly caramel sweet smell. It has that smell in its taste. Um, it overall feels more lavish in comparison to the other cheese. It's like it's more dressed in a way.
I feel like it's I'm getting more aromas from it than from the other teas.
Yes, so Kiman, as a category, a red tea would not be as aromatic as a oolong.
Okay.
However, Kiman, among all the red teas, is the most aromatic. So it is definitely known for being more forward, yeah, being more showy kind of tea.
Um, Dairy animals don't have uh, the same benefits of an aged tree that produces more complex tea leaves. That's not the case with dairy animals. Um, you've got about 2 years of production, maybe a few more depending on how much cheese you want. The older the animal gets, the less milk it produces, and it doesn't gain complexity with age. Um,
Um,
so
does it make a difference of which grass the animal graze?
yeah, yes, very much. So say the Gouda we just had, since it can be made technically anywhere in the world, if you produced it in Holland and then also produced it obviously in like Wisconsin, it grows on different pastures, even if you use the same recipe, because the bacteria in the environment and the differences in the animal's diet, even micro differences, can make a huge difference in flavor. So everything that the cow or goat eats, it creates a totally different flavor in the milk.
Yes, I remember one time I went to a cheese tasting, and the producer, so the same producer, has three different cheeses. Of but the cows have raised three different uh, patches of grass, and I was just that was the first time I noticed the difference, and I was just so shocked. I never thought about it prior to that. That because the cows eat different grass, even if it comes from the same producer, it actually and everything else is the same. It's just the grass that the cows graze on are different, and they taste very very different.
Yeah, I know. Cheese I carry, the producer, he has a herd manager who goes out and measures the grass every day, and then takes the sugar content of the grass and tests the grass for different components, and 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 that determines how they make the cheese, and what pasture the cows are on, and what mix of grass is in that pasture determines how they make the cheese. So it can vary a lot.
Do they ever just like eat some grass or like blend it?
Yes,
It's
yes, they'll put grass and they'll taste it, and I don't know what they're determining, but they'll be like, oh, this is good, this is bad. And that's his job, his whole life.
yeah. Um, yeah. What's about the last cheese from Buffalo?
Yes. So this is probably the strongest cheese on the plate. Um, it is a washed buffalo cheese, called Cuadrilla de Bufala. It's quite soft right now. Um, it is probably most people have heard of Taleggio. So Taleggio is a northern Italian cheese produced in square molds. You get a square of cheese, typically cow's milk. And what washed means, washed is a category. The cheese is just washed with salt brine, or it could be washed with beer or wine, but it creates an environment for bacteria that are a little bit stronger. So Brevibacterium linens is one of them, and that's what creates that orange color. It's not dye you're looking at on the rind. It's bacteria and molds. And those stronger bacteria create a funkier cheese. So typically we associate washed rind cheese with flavors that are, we call them like meaty, a little bit stronger and more pungent. So the Gritti brothers own the dairy, Quattro Portoni Dairy in Bergamo, and they were raising cows and decided to switch lanes, and they really liked water buffalo, so they started just exclusively raising water buffalo. And they're Southeast Asian water buffalo, not related to the plains buffalo we have in the U.S. So commonly they're milked, and their milk is the highest fat, really high fat, double the fat content of cow, and it's like 11%, whereas sheep is about 8%. So you get a really rich, creamy, dense cheese, even when it's soft. Traditionally, mozzarella is made with water buffalo milk. So that was how mozzarella started to be made in Italy when the Arabs brought water buffalo to sort of southern Italy. And then it just became cheaper to produce it with cow's milk. So water buffalo are typically hard to raise. They eat a lot of food. They don't produce very much milk, and they're huge. These are like 2,000-pound animals. So you have to really be committed. The Gritti brothers, one of them passed away recently, but the two brothers and their family run the dairy. And they've had a really, really hard time with the virus in northern Italy. But they kept up production, and so far we haven't had any issues. And they're being really safe with all of their staff because they have 1,200 buffalo right now, and they make 25 cheeses. And if they stop production, it'll just be too hard to start again. So we're really trying to support them, but this is also one of my favorite cheeses. So if you have it, please taste it.
Yes, I mean, what struck me as the most unusual, I would have to say, is the texture. It's like really soft, but also kind of chewy. It's almost like a has almost like a wet dough kind of texture.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very unique, and it has it also has that almost like slightly blue cheesy kind of note to it, which gives a lot of depth. I tasted some like almost like a briny thing. What's that?
Fermented flavor, maybe.
No, it's like a texture thing. There's almost like a candy thing.
Yeah, the texture of the rind is a little grainy, and that is just due to, that's typical of wash rind cheeses. It's just probably the salt aggregation and then a little bit of the bacteria, which some people, you can absolutely eat this rind, but you don't have to. But that's just the texture of wash rinds tends to be a little bit grainy.
Yeah. And it's also very umami cheese. It's like give me a little bit like a brothy feeling. I would say if the last cheese was my favorite, it tastes like a chicken soup. This one tastes almost like a Japanese style rich pork broth.
Yeah, it's like a tonkatsu.
Yes, exactly.
And it's a lot of savory flavors are coming out.
Yeah. And even the texture has so many different layers. When it first touches your mouth, it's like very soft, and then it becomes a little bit chewy. Like I was saying, it's almost like a wet dough. And if you chew on it, you feel like the sandy, grainy part, and it slowly becomes like creamy again. It's like a very fun cheese to chew.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, we got a question here.
Oh.
Great.
What do you think about this pairing? Sorry.
I think this was one of the strongest because there was definitely a third better thing. Like the blue cheese before, it's kind of like there are other flavors coming out.
Yes, it has. I notice a difference between if I only eat the center part of the cheese and pair that with the tea versus with the rind. With the latter, it almost tastes like some kind of candy. Yeah, like a hard candy.
Yeah, kind of like a hard candy.
Yeah, like if people just mention hard candy without specifying, like there's an immediate impression of what hard candy tastes like. It's like that very universal hard candy though.
Wow. Wonderful.
Now shall we mismatch a couple of them? I think I want to try the Longjing with the middle cheese, the cherry boga blue.
Yeah.
Because it's so nutty.
If anyone has any favorites or questions, please throw that into the chat. We'll be happy to. I know not a lot of you had cheese, but if there's something you really love, if you're cross pairing it, let me know.
Yes, and obviously, you know, if you open up a bottle of wine, that's good too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the pairing of the Longjing with the blue cheese. It make that sunflower note comes through even more. Actually, I'm gonna bring the computer a little closer to me, and then so I can see the questions if people type that in.
Fen Huang with the Cuadrilla. Fen Huang with the Cuadrilla. So let's try that.
All right. What was the suggestion? Oh, 黄单丛. So, the 居多仔, the
whoa,
fragrance with the buffalo cheese.
I was really worried that the cheese would overpower the tea, but so far I think it's been pretty balanced.
This is a very, very interesting pairing. So Marnie made that suggestion. To me, it tastes like hawthorn berry. I don't know if, because I rarely find hawthorn berry in the States, but it's one of my favorite flavors. I always have hawthorn berry flavored snacks at home. And when we combine the buffalo cheese with the judozai, which is the Phoenix oolong that's kind of tannic and nutty metallic floral, somehow it created a hawthorn berry note.
I have never had hawthorn berries, but now I've got to go get some.
I can't believe like it's not more popular here, because I think, you know, hawthorn berry obviously is very, very sour, but it has a very unique aroma. So when we do things with hawthorn berry, we always mix them with some kind of sugar, and but the combined result is so good. It's like sweet and sour but very natural, and it has this fragrance. I can just imagine it being really popular in the States. So if anyone have the ambition, please make it a thing, and I would definitely love to get some.
How many of these would you brew in a gaiwan? The last three?
No, I only brewed one tea with the gaiwan, which is the baimudan. I did brew the green tea hot as well, but it's was open vessel, and I had the last three teas cold brew.
Okay.
Yeah. And so Laura was saying she had to alter the cheese a little bit because she's not in New York, and she paired the Dunsholm with the exo aged Gouda cow's milk, and it's amazing. Do you have any thoughts on the exo aged Gouda cow's milk?
I'm not familiar with that one. There's like probably thousands of different types of Gouda produced, and they all have kind of random names. There's not like it's like Italian wines where you have so many different kinds of grapes, and each name changes with the region. But the cheesemongers seem to have good suggestions. Someone here is saying Taleggio instead of the water buffalo Taleggio, so it was a cow's milk Taleggio. But those are great. You could just cross over in the same style, and it would still work really well. It probably has slightly less funky flavors because cow's milk is a little more straight down the middle than buffalo milk.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I mean, because we paired the danton with the Gouda as well, but it's a sheep Gouda. I just tried the Timon with the sheep Gouda, and it's so good. It tastes like a dashi, like the Japanese uh, like a dry fish with seaweed kind of broth. It, it's like it added to the umami note. It's so good. I love it. I mean, I don't know. I'm just such a sucker for anything umami.
Well, we have so much of that in cheese because there's so many amino acids.
Exactly. Somebody asked where exactly in Loire is this from? I think it was referring to the first cheese.
So, Savoie. It's from the Savoie. The Tome de Chevron.
Yes, the Tome de Chevron. And then we have
what kind of tea would you recommend with Brie and Camembert? So Brie and Camembert are both Blumine style cheeses. So the same category as the first cheese, but just typically made with cow milk. You can make Brie and Camembert with goat or sheep as well. But they're not name protected, so they can be made anywhere. And typically, I would say the red tea would be good, or possibly the white tea. It depends on the Brie and Camembert. The problem with Brie and Camembert is that they can either be really mild. You can have a really mild, creamy one, or a very strong. I have a Brie that tastes like, someone described it as hot trash, but it's
wow, very attractive description.
It's like mushrooms and cauliflower. It's like a hot mushroom and cauliflower soup. So you would have to be very careful to find a tea that also has that same funky notes. But yeah, I would say the red tea or possibly the white tea if it was very aromatic.
Yes, I remember we one time paired a caramel with like a very mild one with a it went really well with white tea with a lot of hair. So like the first picking grade, like the Bangdan, where it's very like because tea hair has a very unique note. It doesn't sound very good when I just say it has a hairy note because you probably don't want to drink that. But it's a good note. Trust me. It's like and especially with when you sun dry it, it's you know how if you people here don't sun dry their clothes, but in China people will sun dry. They sometimes will take the comforter outside to soak it up in the sun, or maybe you have like a towel or something that you carried with you to the park or something, and then it just soak up the sun and you smell it. It has this aroma. It has a like when sun hits fabric, it has a something, and so tea hair has that note. And so that note for me went really well with like a very mild caramel. And then it's either a very hairy tea, like a certain kinds of green tea, or it'll be like a white tea where it has a lot of hair but also is sun dried.
So you would use that term to describe certain teas, are there specific teas you would say have more of that hair note than others?
Yes, like tea hair has I mean, tea hair has a lot of amino acid in there, so it's definitely kind of umami, but it also has a distinctive note, which it's very difficult for me to describe. I usually, because in the tea world, it's become a basic note. We usually would just say, oh, the hair note is very prominent. But it's hard to describe what a hair note is. You know, it's like almost like the taste of chocolate. It becomes a basic chocolate. If you're trying to describe the taste of chocolate to someone who's never had chocolate before, it's very, very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone asked, with balancing and pairing, are there guidelines or qualities to be avoided? And maybe I'll talk about that, and if you have any
Yeah, I mean, I have
thoughts.
my very messy original note. If I look at these, I remember, so I actually wrote down, remember we're talking about that very strong, like animal fat note that I figured probably is gonna offend some palate. I definitely noticed that a lot was the Tom de Share was the Baimudan. So let me actually try them together now to see if that was the case. So it basically enabled each other. So the notes were very bright, came out. However, I feel like it made it taste too much like a lamb or something.
Yeah. I found if I brew the green, something like the long gin, the wrong way, if I brew it too long and I let the tannins get too present, then it fights a lot with the cheese, because that's when that metallic flavor comes in. So I would say, I would generally, with the pairings, when someone sends me the pairing notes, I look for like with like, or opposites, or if they're from the same region, which unfortunately we can't do so well because there's not I don't really have access to Chinese cheese. But if they're opposite, so like if someone sends me a note and says this wine or tea is very tannic, then I'll choose something that's high in fat to balance out those tannins. So if I know the Cuadrilla, the buffalo milk cheese is higher in fat, then I'll choose that. And then opposites, so, or then like with like, so if it says it's very floral, then I'll choose a cheese that has very floral notes. And that usually gets me somewhere if I don't really know, if I haven't tasted the one of the things before, which a lot of times I haven't been able to taste both the pairings together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, actually, I just tried again the baijiu with the goat cheese, and I just want to confirm again. Yes, it made it. You know how goat has a taste; it just made that taste stand out so much more. So if you love that particular note, then definitely it's good. But I feel like it's definitely one of the note that's very aggressive. So a lot of people might not like that. Yeah. So to me, yeah, actually all the pairing that I didn't like when we did the initial tasting was either when it was too much. So when it combined together, it was either too herbaceous or like a too animal fat taste. Or one overpowers the other. So basically when I combine the two, I can only taste the cheese or I can only taste the tea, which was also things I feel like it was not well, it's not merged well.
Goat cheese, if it's not carefully made, can have those really animal tastes, and it's because of a higher amount of capric acid in the milk, and that when people say they don't like goat cheese, that's what generally happens, is they've had like a bunch of goat cheese that's not made very well, and it has that very like goat fur taste to it.
Right.
And that is not typical of all goat cheese, but if you know you have one that has more of that, and it could just be it's a very farmy tasting goat cheese, and I definitely probably would not pair that with tea. I have some in the case that are a bit stronger, and that animal fur taste,
Right.
maybe it's a little bit like tea hair, would fight with the tea for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, actually, this cheese tasted alone, it doesn't taste very goat to me, but yeah, when I combine them, yes, the nuttiness of Longjing really offsets the goat cheese. Yeah, and like it makes each other a little bit rounder. Yeah, like Longjing is a little bit tannic, like coming out pretty strong, and the goat cheese is like a little tangy, so it's like it cuts through each other, but yet it's like somehow it's like rounded out. Do we have any more questions? Right. Okay, so maybe we should just thank everyone for joining us. I have one question, Carol. So what do you think about the role bread plays in a cheese tasting.
Yeah. People love bread. And I think it's great to cleanse the palate, but I do feel very strongly that eating bread with cheese when you're doing a tasting like together, it really gets in the way. Crackers too. If I'm just having a cheese, that's great. But if you're going to be doing a tasting and a pairing, it really is so much important to the texture and flavor of the cheese just to keep other things out of the way. But there's a lot of cheese and tea here, and my palate probably is pretty tired. So I think it's nice to have something like that, or maybe just dried fruit to kind of cleanse the palate between tastings. That would be my suggestion.
Right. Yeah, I've seen people using raisins to as a in between the tastings. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and I feel like with bread, sometimes cheese is very the sodium content is kind of salty. So with cheese, it helps to lower that a little bit as well. By the way, there is one tea that pairs really, really well with bread, which is a green tea called Biluochun. I know it sounds bizarre, but in our past experiments, we were just all so surprised when there was a tea. It has a lot of hairy taste, kind of like a toasted rice notes. So we thought it would pair really well with cheese, but it didn't go with any cheese. However, it went really well with the bread. And I just remember during that time, we had a few people in the tea house. We were all just so surprised. We're like, we should just do this tea with the bread alone. Yeah.
What is the name again?
It's Biluochun. At the tea house, we actually currently sold out of it, but it is a historically famous tea, so we should expect it to come back in the selection sometime. It does have a translation, but it's not very commonly used in the States. The translation is green snail spring, but I do see people call it Biluochun, just straight Biluochun more common. It's a green tea that takes on a spiral shape. It's been rolled vigorously during making. It's very, very small, very fuzzy, but it's actually very sharp. It's one of those super sharp floral green teas.
Very interesting. Yeah. Someone asked about Chinese cheeses. I don't know, Shunan, if you want to speak to that at all.
Yeah, so China, all in all, China does not have a lot of dairy products, like milk-based products. This is mostly due to, for a majority of the history and most geographic areas of China, it's very agriculture-based and not a lot of pasture. The land also is, usually have mountains, hills, and things like that. But when I was in China, the cheese I've had is either imported or it comes from Tibet or Mongolia. But it's a very different kind of cheese. It's almost like a dried milk, which I haven't really found anything similar here. It's almost like a candy that you can eat. And they usually make them into small size as well. So people just really just like put it in the mouth and then melt it over time. So it's very much eating it like a candy. It tastes more almost like a yogurt kind of taste to it. I would say in a way it's even more acquired taste for people who haven't had cheese. But cheese is slowly becoming a thing in China, mostly due to, I think, we're living in the age where food exchange is more frequent than before. But just like, so my mom, this is a few years back, but my mom one time called me. This is when she was living in China. She's here now. She was like, "Oh, the store downstairs from us have cheese now," and I was like, "Oh, what kind of cheese?" And she said, "Oh, it's called cheese." So that's basically gives you an idea of how much how much in depth Chinese goes with cheese right now. It's very similar to, I guess here, if a Chinese person come to the US and then some restaurant just ask them, do you want coffee or tea at the end of dinner, and the person's like, what tea? It's like, oh, it's called tea, you know, or it's like green tea, which is very, very general. You know, I think at the very beginning, that we experience something that's from a foreign culture, there's always this tendency to oversimplify it. But over time, people start to understand the detail, the specifics, the nuance more.
I will say that in my conversations with cheese importers and like the cheese industry in the last few years, the thing that comes up the most is China, and it being the new frontier for cheese, and that a lot of young people are looking to start producing cheese and taking the European techniques and kind of making it their own historical recipe. And a lot of distributors are looking to get into China, and it's from what I've heard that the industry is expanding really, really fast there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll be very fascinated to taste a cheese that's produced in China with European technique. Yeah, but I definitely can see China as a big consumer market for European style cheese though. Yeah. I mean, not only just with cheese, even cured meat. I start seeing, like if you go to a big city like Beijing or Shanghai, a lot of supermarket, they start having selections of things that we would consider basically like elements of Western style fine dining, but you start seeing them in China. Yeah.
I was reading about a tea or a cheese shop, a European style cheese shop in Beijing, and the proprietor was making his own version of Camembert, and he was calling it Beijing Grey. And I would love to taste it. Once we find out how to import it, it would be really fascinating to try it with the cheese.
Oh, yeah, I'll be on the lookout of that next time I go to China, and then maybe I can help make a connection as well. But I haven't tasted anything other than like the traditional Tibetan or Mongolian style cheese in China, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we have I mean, I don't know if now, but I know we used to have a lot of water buffalo, so that could be interesting. Yeah, you know, a classic Chinese painting would have a boy sitting on a water buffalo and playing a flute. I don't know why that's a thing, but it is a thing. You see them in a lot of paintings and porcelains and stuff like that.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. All right. Well, should we wrap up?
Yes. Yeah. And thank you very much again, Carol, for doing this with me.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Yeah, so the selection of the cheese and the tea are still on the website. If you want to make a purchase and revisit this video, you can definitely do so. And we, as a season change, we're also thinking about, you know, if people like it, we want to make it a rotational thing. So we'll continue to taste different cheese with different tea, and we'll come up with different pairings. Because I think this is definitely something very interesting for both tea drinkers and then people in the food and culinary world. You know, it's not super traditional for Chinese to pair tea with food, but I think there's a strong calling for that. It'll take some, you know, finding out to do that. So we'll just be the guinea pig and keep trying. And if we find something exciting, we want to share with everyone.
Thanks so much, guys. It was really fun. I know I can't hear you, but it was a pleasure to talk with you.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Carol. Yeah.
Thanks, Shunan. Have a great day.
Thank you.